Hello and welcome to Sounds Heal Podcast. I am your host, Natalie Brown, and thank you so much for joining me as we continue to explore the fields of sound healing, sound therapy, and generally the use of sound for health and wellness. Today, our guest is Ross Barrable, an acoustic sculptor. He makes instruments primarily out of titanium, instruments such as harmony wind harps, gongs, and other sound sculptures. Initially, he was inspired by playing the folk harp and hearing the sound of the harp in the wind. And so he explored instrument making with the folk harp initially, and then started making sound sculptures out of metal, which he's been doing for over 40 years now. And so we have really an amazing, an inspirational conversation about his journey through sound, the reason he picked titanium, and I think his philosophy about gong playing, and also his descriptions of gong making are just really beautifully said and expressed. So I really hope you enjoy this podcast with Ross Barrable. This episode is sponsored by the Om Shop and Spa. The Om Shop is located in Sarasota, Florida, and you can visit them in person to see their amazing showroom of crystal vibrational tools, sound healing instruments, as well as their luxury spa. You can also visit them online at theomshop.com. The Om Shop really can help you and advise you if you're looking for something in particular, if you're hoping to kind of up your sound healing practice. They just really are excellent with advice and the learning process as well. So thank you so much to the Om Shop and Spa for their support and sponsorship of this podcast. Please enjoy this episode with Ross Barrable. All right, great. Well, thank you, Ross, for joining me. And I really love starting with some backstory before we get to everything that's developed into what you're doing now. So let's go back and maybe kind of ponder what was so influential for you early on in life. Maybe it's musical experiences, artistic, or even spiritual things that were influential that probably drew you into what you're doing now.
Okay. That's a good question. And I thought about this over the years. What inspired me to get into music? And I realized my first experience of really, my first awareness of the power of sound was when I was a young teenager. I grew up in Southern Ontario in Canada. We lived in the country. It was always lived rurally, and we lived beside this railroad track. And on both sides of the railroad tracks the railroad track was up on a berm. On both sides of the railroad tracks were these huge frog ponds. And I can remember as a teenager, I was a loner. I was totally, I didn't fit in. I was trying to find out who I was, like all teenagers are. And I can remember going out on a Friday night and by myself and down to the roller skating rink or whatever, and looking to connect with someone, not being able to do that, coming home and walking home, and it was just dusk. And then I walked out, got home, but I said, I'm not going in the house. I'm going to walk out these railroad tracks. And it was like late summer, August, and you can hear crickets. And so I'm walking out these railroad tracks and I'm hearing all these frogs chanting back and forth across the tracks, and just standing there and listening to this incredible harmonic symphony of these frogs chanting together in perfect unison and different cadences, and just standing there and just dropping into this, into that sound pool of harmonics, and feeling totally connected, totally whole, totally the longing to connect, that emotional longing to connect, was outcreated by the sound of these frogs, by that harmonic content. And I didn't realize it at the time, you know, and I certainly couldn't articulate what was going on. But looking back, that was my first experience of the power of harmonic sound. And I grew up, you know, we took piano lessons as kids. You know, I didn't, you know, really have an overwhelming desire to pursue music, but I had that basic, and then I discovered the flute, and then I took private flute lessons, and moving on into my 20s was, you know, it was back in the 80s, and we were. I was participating in this group that meditated or got together and chanted on Wednesday nights. And one day, this gal showed up with a folk harp and sat down and started playing the folk harp. And I blew my mind. I just went, what is this? I have got to have a harp. And I was always handy, you know, my father always had a shop. He always built stuff. So I said, man, and I looked inside the harp, and when people build instruments, often sign them, you know, down, they sign them, and they sign them on the inside of the soundboard. So I looked inside this harp, and lo and behold, this guy's name is in there with a phone number. I call him up, and he lives in California. 2 weeks later, I was on a plane. I went out and visited him. And he turned me on to a harp maker out there, Robinson's Harp Shop, and I spent a month out there learning how to make folk harps. This was 1970s, late 70s. So that just, I was besmitten by the harp. And I spent 20 years building hundreds and hundreds of these folk harps, and it just stole my heart. And so playing the harp, building these harps, stringing them, tuning them, stringing, tuning, listening, tuning. That was my education in understanding and listening to sound and listening to harmonics, listening to what intervals really moved me, you know, it allowed me to have, you know, certain different feelings. And that's how I developed my intuitive understanding how to create sound boxes and resonant objects, was from building harps. And the ultimate wind harp is a folk harp in the wind, standing outside in the wind. And when you're out, you know, when you play the harp, you eventually you're going to play in an outdoor venue, and the wind will come up and blow through the strings. And the first time I heard that, I went, oh my God, I've never heard anything like this, but it's strangely familiar, you know? And it just, to me, it sounded like a choir of angels. And I said, man, this is gorgeous. All these harmonics, especially when you tune the harp to the pentatonic scale, you know, and on the harp, it's really easy, just sharpen E's and B's, and you get this beautiful thing here, right? You can't hit a wrong note. So yeah, tune the harp and that, put it in the wind, it's like, oh my God. So that was my experience of the first wind harp, was a folk harp in the wind. And then I said, man, I want to take that concept and build, you know, wind harps structurally, you know, that out of metal, that wouldn't decompose in time, that you'd be able to weather being outdoors. And so that's, I first started off with, you know, bronze and metals that were available that I could find, stainless steels and stuff like that. And then I got in the car wreck, and it was my wake up call in my 40s. I guess I was 38, and I hit a pickup truck that had 2x6s sticking in the vehicle, came through the windshield, knocked a hole in my sinus bone, Amazing, I survived. But the surgeon put in a piece of titanium to fill the hole. And that's what introduced me to titanium. And so I started looking at that. I was already building wind harps at the time. And I started researching titanium and found out some really, really interesting things about this amazing metal. It's half the weight of steel, twice the strength, and super resonant. Most metallurgical engineers don't have a clue about the resonance of titanium. They're all interested in the structural component. So I've had to really discover what that was all about. But anyway, I'm probably going a little bit further than you want to hear right now.
I'm actually curious now that you mentioned that. Well, yeah, maybe let's talk about the design of your initial wind harps, obviously for outdoors. Maybe some of the initial experiments with that, as far as what they looked like, how big were they, what kind of business were you getting through that? And then let's get into titanium.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the wind harps, I was always really fascinated with sacred geometry. And when I was, after my first year of college, I took a year off and traveled to, hitchhiked around Europe and found myself one day sitting in Cairo. And I took a tour of the Great Pyramids, went in the King's Chamber, and then 5 of us that were hanging out, traveling together, we met each other, at the youth hostel in Cairo. We ran around the back corner of the Great Pyramid of Giza and climbed up the corner of it. We climbed up the corner because going up the face is pretty dangerous. And at that time you could do that. And of course they were screaming at us to come down, but we just ignored them and climbed up to the top of the Great Pyramid, sat on top of that thing for 3 hours. And it felt like 3 minutes. We experienced a total, it was like a time warp. And because of the geometry and the shape of that pyramid, it creates a vortex at the top of it, which tweaks your perception of time. And after that experience, after coming back to Canada, I started looking into the pyramids and realized, this is the epitome of sacred geometrical structure. And I started studying sacred geometry, and that has been a core design, fundamental design theme of everything that I do sculpturally. And so I studied I got into Pythagoras and the Platonic solids. So a lot of all of my wind harps are designed using the principles of sacred geometry, specifically the phi ratio harmonic, which is the golden mean ratio. So the proportions in all the wind harps I'm using those ratios. And of course, we are, our biology is all sacred geometry. The Fibonacci sequence is embedded in the distance of our, where our knuckles on our hand and our joints, and the proportions of our nose relative to, from here to here and the belly, the whole thing. We're all sacred geometry. So it made sense to me to build sound sculptures that were in resonance with these proportions, because if they were resonating with these harmonics, and they were vibrating at harmonics that were in harmony with nature, us humans being designed with sacred geometrical principles, we're going to resonate with these sounds because the geometry of there's going to be a sympathetic resonance between these two structures. So that just made sense to me. Plus, it looks cool. Geometry to me has always been beautiful. I mean, the proportions in geometry I'm hardwired. I guess everybody's hardwired to look at beauty from that perspective of, harmony and balance and proportion and whatnot. And I think that's how we're designed. So actually I'm going to take my laptop and walk outside and see if I can show you. I have 3 wind harps in the yard right now, and they'll just give you a snapshot.
That'd be great. Yeah.
What they look like. I just don't want to lose my signal. That's all. So I'm going to stand I'm gonna stand on the porch. So there's can you see that harp there?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, there's a harp. Well, that's I call that this Flower of Life. The soundboard on it has a sound hole cut out with a water jet that's in the shape of a Flower of Life. So that one is about 9.5 feet tall. It's got 9 strings on it. That one's actually made out of aluminum and steel. This one over here, let's see, can you see that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Now yeah, show me the picture. Okay, so I can see it. There, that one.
Yep.
So that one's made out of titanium, and it's a double tetrahedron. It's got a sound box, a resonator on it. It's a 72-degree bowl. And it sounds pretty good. There's no wind right now, unfortunately, so we're not going to hear it. And then this is the granddaddy over here. That one I call the Song of Aquarius. It's all titanium. It's got a stainless steel base on it, and it's got it's like 12 feet tall, and has an amazing sound to it. So I'm kind of tapped out with where to go next with wind harps. I've built hundreds of them, and I'm not sure what geometry I want to build next. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll refer people to the website to listen to some of those. But what would, just for our people that are listening back to this right now, how would you describe the experience when the wind gets going? How does that sound or feel like to you?
Okay. It's I refer to it as like full spectrum harmonics. And I've learned that when I tune the wind harps to really make it super simple. When I first started, I had 44 strings on there. It was just too much information. And the way the wind harp works is when the wind blows against a string, it primarily activates this first fundamental, which is the first harmonic, which is the octave. So if string's tuned to C, it'll vibrate the C above, whatever that is, the next octave of C, and then the second harmonic is a G above that. But the most powerful one is the octave, and then and as you go higher, they get less and less loud. So you'll either hear the octave or the fifth above that. And so I tune the harp to like simple C and G, or D and an A. So a real easy discernible fifth that's universally recognized as harmony. And that way, when the wind blows through there, you can hear the harmony instead of all these, if I got too many strings in there, it creates too much information, and it's hard to be able to go to really hear. It sounds just it's too much. So, but it's, my favorite time to listen to the harps is at night, when the wind dies down, and it's a little bit less, but it's very steady and coherent, even breeze. And I'll walk out, and usually it's dark out, and very slight breeze, and these harps are doing this deep, low vibrato, and they're talking back and forth together like they're having this conversation. And it's just magical. It's an otherworldly sound to me, and I love it. And other times during the day when the wind's really gusty, they won't sing at all because it's too turbulent. The strings work on the principle of resonance, and when there's just a right coherent, it's like blowing a flute. When you first start playing, you can blow a lot of air and not get any sound, but when you refine your embouchure and get a real coherent stream through your lips, a little bit of wind, and you got beautiful music. So it's a lot of metaphors for life.
Beautiful. Well, you mentioned that you're not quite sure where you want to go with the wind harps. So let's talk about that transition where titanium came in, the experimentation with that then led to gongs.
Yes.
Yeah.
So in the journey of building wind harps, I built them out of every metal that I could get my hands on, just experimentally, and when I moved to Santa Fe, I started getting the wind harps cast in bronze, the resonator anyway, and then making a whole structure. But bronze is it was a silken bronze. It was very heavy, very dense, and it took a lot to get it going. Kind of moved on to stainless steel and aluminum, because some aluminums are actually quite resonant. 6061 aluminum alloy is actually very, very resonant. They make a lot of chimes, wind chimes out of those. But when I discovered titanium, I made my first titanium wind harp in 1990. And when you work with titanium, the only way to get to fabricate anything with titanium is you have to develop a relationship with the aerospace industry, because they're the people that source titanium and have the technology to work with it, because it's very stiff, but it's light. It's half the weight of steel, twice the strength, but super flexible. But it's tough. It's like you bend. It's like I could take a soundboard of one of my wind harps, and I could literally wrap it around my knee. I could bend the thing almost 180 degrees, and it would come right back. Boom. Wouldn't kink. Wouldn't bend. Wouldn't. You couldn't. So it was. Certain alloys are quite resilient that way. But I said, man, let me try and see what titanium would sound like. So I had the tooling made to have a 72-degree resonator, which was like a bell, spun out of titanium, and that was the resonator for my really early wind harps. And I went with 72 degrees because that creates the pentagram. 5 times 72 equals 360. So that's what we are. We're the the Vitruvius, the Vitruvius man, the 5 inside the circle. He's got 5 points, and that generates the fire ratio, which is the gold mean ratio, which is what we are. That's our proportions. So I said, well, that makes sense. Let me do that. So I built that harp, and it's just the sound through the titanium and that resonator, and I had a titanium soundboard on it. To me, it was magical. It was beautiful and was lightweight. I found that I could anodize them and just create this beauty through them, and super, super, super expensive to get the metal and to work with it and weld it. I had to tool up to weld it, but I've stuck with it. And it's been my signature metal that I worked with. And I built, let me see, I did that for 90s through early 2000s. Built a lot of, and I've still built wind harps every once in a while. But it was through building those wind harps that really sold me on the acoustical properties of titanium. And 3 years ago, when I came to the conference, I had already built some bells out of titanium, and they sounded really good. The sustain in them was incredible, and I spoke with Michener and told him that, and I showed him the bells and said, man, I'm going to start making some titanium gongs. And just started. I mean, I thought I would jump right in, figure it out. This whole thing has gone through its own growing pains, let me tell you. There's, it's the whole, bells and gongs are 2 totally different creatures. The acoustic some are totally different. So, but I knew enough about working with titanium to know all the different steps I had to go through to develop a gong that I'm very happy with now. and I know how to get good sound out of them. And I'm still learning. It's just like, every gong is different, you know, and I'm learning from every gong that I build how to make them better.
Yeah, maybe a couple things there. Maybe mention what anodizing means, and because I know a lot of people see the results of that, but maybe explain that. Yeah, so start with that.
Yeah, so putting artwork on gongs is on titanium gongs is really exciting, because titanium is one of the few metals. You can anodize other metals, but titanium is anodized using electricity, specifically DC voltage. And what the process is you can dip the hole. Looks like you've seen titanium jewelry, how absolutely vibrant it is. It's because it actually is reflecting light. And when you anodize titanium, you take DC voltage and you use a conductive solution that I actually use. This stuff's all over YouTube, but I started doing this long before they were explaining how to do it on YouTube. And I've got a few tricks with it, but I'm able to, let me see if you can see. See this? Let me see. Okay, yeah. Let's look at this one. So, can you hear me?
Yeah, just fine. Yep.
Okay. So these different colors are actually different voltages that we use, different DC voltages that we use. And when you use DC voltage to create these colors, when you dip the gong in a bath, what happens is you grow a transparent layer of titanium oxide on the gong, which is transparent. And the thickness of that layer is a function of the voltage that's used. So like a 9 volts will create the gold, and then a 16 volt will create the purple. And so when you finish it and dry it off and everything, when the light hits that thin transparent layer of titanium oxide, it's the thickness of that layer that determines the frequency of light that's refracted as light hits the gong. So what you're seeing is really refracted light. It's not a paint, it's not a pigment. And so I think that's why it's so brilliant and it looks so amazing relative to paint or I guess there's patinas you can put on metals, different kinds of metals, but I'm just thrilled with the possibilities of using this form to create artwork on the gongs.
Right. And you had mentioned that your artwork, or how you're presenting the gongs in particular, are a bit different. You're getting away from the sacred geometry. Can you explain why you ended up doing that?
Yeah, as much as I love sacred geometry and I've worked with it over the years, I've come to realize that sound is not static. Sacred geometry is actually a snapshot in time of the geometry of the waveform. And it's beautiful, but to me, the gong, one of the beauty of the gong is it when we interact with it, it gives us this experience of the fluidity of sound and motion. And I think one of the most powerful parts about attributes of listening and playing the gong is it moves that emotional matter within us. So I'm about motion. I'm about fluidity. So this particular collection or series of gongs, I'm calling it the cosmic wave. So I'll use different colors and different combinations of colors, but what I really want to communicate is the wave, movement of the wave. And so that's kind of where I'm at. I'll put sacred geometrical art on gongs if that's desired, but my my creative juices right now are flowing in the form of the cosmic wave, and yeah, that's where I'm at with sound.
Yeah, nice. Well, what are some of the I guess you could say benefits that you and others have found in playing these instruments? You know, if you want to kind of go into the sound healing therapeutic aspects that you've experienced for yourself and heard from some of maybe your clients.
Okay. Yeah, my interest in the gongs has been, I think, a little bit different than other people in terms of its benefits. I'm not so focused on how does it affect my physical body. I'm more interested personally, and what draws me to the gong is its effect on my consciousness. And I'm saying that because what I've experienced with the gong is that, mostly playing it, and is that, I mean, sound is fundamental in our universe. I mean, every spiritual tradition has got some sort of way of saying in the beginning was the word. You know, whether it's Buddhism or Hinduism or the Sikhs or Christianity. And to me, what that's saying was, in the beginning was vibration. In the beginning was the vibration of love. That is the primal cause substance, is the vibration of love. And in my spiritual tradition, they call it the Shabda Dun, or the sound current, the universal sound current. And so I overlay that perspective of sound over most everything that I do around creating sound sculpture. And to me, the value of playing the gong, and I think interacting with the gong, for me, the most powerful way to interact with it is actually play it for yourself first. And in playing the gong, what I'm experiencing, and what I encourage people to do, is to it's not so focused on technique as it is just listening, really being present. And and I don't do this all the time. I don't. It's just, strike it and then listen. Let the gong expand and then let it decay. Let it go through its cycle. Really, really listen, and then explore the gong. But it's in listening, and the sound of the gong to me is so beautiful and so full of all these, rich harmonics, that it's very easy to keep my attention focused on the sound of the gong. And in that happening, in listening to it and focusing my attention on the gong, that actually gives my mind something to do, because it's focusing on the sound, and that stills my mind so that I can just be in this moment right now, listening to the gong. There's nothing else coming. The subjective dialogue gets out-created because I got my attention focused on the beauty of that sound in this moment. And to me, a moment is 3 seconds. Quantum number of 3 is a moment, 3 seconds. If I can just keep my attention focused on that gong and just listen to that, and just be with the gong, nothing else going on. That to me is a huge spiritual practice, just to do that. And where we are in the world right now, with all the distractions that are going on through social media that fragment and dilute my ability to focus my attention and be present, even just for myself, let alone anybody else. If I can't if my attention, if my units of attention are so fragmented and distracted by all this stuff, and I get sucked in to Instagram all the time. But I think that the battlefield right now in consciousness is for our attention. I think that's what's really going on a global level. If I can distract your attention and get you to put your attention over here, then I can influence your belief system. And then if I can influence your belief system, then I can control your thoughts and your actions. So I think I feel like the gong is a powerful tool to be used as part of our spiritual exercises, just to collect our attention, you know, and to bring back my units of awareness back into a single focus, so I can make choices on my own behalf. But if my attention is fragmented, I can't make a decision. I cannot friggin' make a decision and move forward because I don't have enough power to collect my will, and that takes to make a decision and to make a change. That's because my attention's been fragmented. And to me, sound is the ultimate tool to recollect those energies. And to me, that's what sound's been used down through millennium, through all the spiritual traditions, as a setup for meditation, to focus, recollect the energies, laser focus. It totally transcends the whole monkey mind syndrome, because it gives the mind something to do, and sound can do that. So it's just so beautiful. And that's what I had to give to the Gong community, is that story right there. That's the truth for me. I really don't go into, I talk about sound in terms of how we can use it to shift consciousness, to shift our own consciousness, and to get present with ourselves, be here now.
That's right.
It's so simple.
Beautifully expressed. Yeah. And there's so much to the ability just to have presence and an active participation with the gong and its energy, and what is it teaching you, and how you're interacting with it. I think you're absolutely right, as using gong as a way to tune in to your own consciousness yourself. How does it shift you? But you're right, that you have to be in the moment. You have to be with it while you're doing it. And that's something that we're usually pretty scattered most of the time. So allowing for those moments just to be with the gong. Yeah, it reminds me very much of some of the messages from the Gong community and that conference that we were both at. That really is the message of the Gong, is that source of expansion. Yeah, beautifully expressed. Thank you for that.
Yeah. And the other thing I like to talk about is harmonic consciousness. The more I listen to this gong that has this design to create all these harmonics that are related to each other with these perfect mathematical proportions that are embedded in all of nature, right? And as I play the gong and I'm listening to the gong, I'm entraining my awareness to be sensitive to these harmonies, so that it's expanding my awareness of harmony. So I'm entraining myself so that I can, if I can hear it here and go, oh, I love that harmony. That's really different. What's that? And explore. I mean, the gong, it's infinite. When we play, we never play the gong the same way twice. It's always different, and different parts of the gong, and exploring the gong. And that's another thing I love about titanium, man. It's very dynamic. There's a lot of different tones that it can generate. It's just not one tone. And even when I'm using I'm discovering the flumi, these bare love flumies on, they're the only ones that work on the titanium gongs. They are amazing. And I just barely have to touch it. Once you wake the gong up, it's like I move that thing maybe 2 inches and it just takes off in a whole new direction. It's like, whoa. So it's like, it's got my attention, 100%. I'm in awe at what's going on with the gong in that moment. And it's just, it's really a wonderful spiritual practice, because you get to do something, but your attention is like just riveted on this sound. And the more that I'm aware of these harmonics and these harmony in music, I think that empowers us to be more aware of recognizing harmony in all sorts of relations in the outer world. If I can't recognize it, I can't connect with it.
That's right. Well, yeah, but because there's harmony in the ecosystem and harmony in our health, and yeah, you're right. The ability to recognize that or discern when it isn't harmonious, right?
Exactly. Well, to be able to differentiate, have the discernment to go, you know what, that doesn't feel right. I'm not going there. I'm not going to engage in that reality because there's no harmony here. Or, being able to discern the difference between chaos and harmony. Sounds simple, sounds, trite, but I think we learn that through music, through listening to me. I mean, you're musicians, you play the violin. What does it teach you about harmony?
Yeah, about harmony, about life, about the nature of everything. That's right. Yeah.
Right on. And it's not even something we can maybe even articulate, but it's just
maybe that's a good thing sometimes, because I think the gong does that as well. Sometimes it's okay not to have words.
Yeah. It's all beyond words.
Yeah. And that's a good thing. Yeah, we have enough words and distractions. It's nice that you have to worry about. But you did put that into words very well, I want to say. Yeah. Well, so let's keep it in the present. What are you working on right now? What are you curious about? What's kind of sparking with your instruments right now?
Well, it's I'm continuing to. I'm really committed to refining the titanium gong as much as I can, and just the part, there's quite a few aspects about making gongs, and one of them is the heat treating of the gongs. Every gong builder knows that you have to heat treat the metal at some point in the process of making a gong. And some of them, Martin Blazer, he has videos where he puts them over the fire and heats them. He's using fire, which is just beautiful. I love the way he does that. And you can heat them with torches. And I decided to use technology to heat treat gongs. And there's a lot of different ways. The heat treating industry is very, 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 very technical and very complex, but the reason you heat treat a gong is because even when you get sheet metal, and you get it from the mill, you get it in sheets. When they roll that stuff out, they force that metal and squish it out into these tiny little sheets. And when they do that, there's stresses embedded in the metal. And anytime there's stresses embedded in the metal, the molecules, they're all crooked and twisted like that. And when there's stresses in the metal, that impedes the flow of vibration through the metal. And when you hammer a gong into place, there's stresses embedded, and usually after they do that, they heat treat it to relax the metal and allow all the molecules to come back and, and just to flow back and fit in together in a nice coherent manner, which allows the sound to travel through it. So that's what I'm exploring is the magical world of how to, alchemically heat treat these gongs and to make them really good. So there's a lot to explore there. So I'm continuing to, and it totally changes the sound of the gong once it's heat treated. Totally changes it. So that's kind of what I'm exploring, and also just expanding, refining the artwork that goes on the gong. There was at one point I thought, well, I'm going to try and make gongs resonate at a certain note, and I abandoned that pretty quick. It's like, you're going to screw up a lot of gongs if you try and do that, right. Because once you start hammering on gongs, you can't go back. You beat on them, hammer around the edge. You put some gongs. I will hammer points on the gong in a sacred geometrical pattern. I usually use a hexagram or a pentagram. Most gong makers are pretty familiar with using sacred geometry. And when you hammer, when you put a stress point on the soundboard of a gong, it's like a rock in the middle of the stream. As the water goes down and hits that rock, the water goes around the rock and creates an eddy behind it. It's the same with vibration. And when you strike the gong, and the vibration, moves out through the face of the gong and it hits one of these stress points, it's basically an interference, creates an interference pattern around that stress point and brings more complexity into the sound of the gong. So just the more you hammer it, the more complex the sound becomes. And it has its beauty to it. And I'm exploring that, but there's also something to be said, but just let it be what it is. Let that gong have just a pure single tone. And what I'm after in creating gongs, the ultimate gong from my perspective, is when you strike it, you hear a discernible, deep, fundamental tone with the natural harmonics of that tone. And you can hear it. You use the frequency counter on your phone, and it's like, it's held right there within 1/10 of a hertz. It doesn't waver. And that's what these gongs generate. That's how clean and clear that fundamental tone is. And then as you put more energy into the gong or move out to the perimeter of the gong, you start liberating some of the harmonics. And so that's what I want to create. And that's what I am creating with these gongs, is a deep fundamental that sustains. And then if you want to move it higher, you got to put more energy into it, but you got to play closer to the edge to bring it up. That's what I find to be beautiful about titanium, is that it will do that, and it has a lovely sustain to it as well. So
sounds like it must take a lot of trial and error, though, at least initially. Yeah,
it does. Like I say, once you go there, you can't go back. Can't take that. Once you put a stress point on a gong, you can't take it out. So you can go too far. And the question is, how far do I go? When is it done? When does this gong sound as good as it's going to sound? It's like, that's why, when I work on these gongs, I've got to be absolutely alone. I can't have anybody in my space. I don't listen to music. There's no music on, nothing. It's just me and the gong. I've got to totally tune into that metal. And I've been asking myself, is that even possible? Can I tune into the vibration of this element, titanium? How do you do that? How do you tune into an element and go, what do you want to sound like? I got my own ideas, but maybe what does this gong want to sound like? Every gong, and my line is every gong has its own state of consciousness. Every gong has its own unique vibration. It's like that's the great gift that Pythagoras left us, is the law of vibration. Is every vibration in everything in the universe has its own unique vibration. Everything, every blade of grass, there's thousands of pine trees where I live in Colorado. Every pine needle is different, has its own signature frequency. That's a mind blow.
Well, yeah, and it naturally knows what it's meant to be or wants to be, and so do your gongs. So I think you're right about allowing yourself to tune into that. It's okay to question, do I have the ability to tune into this titanium? And yeah, I mean, I think you do.
Well, it's the intent. You know what, whether my mind cognizes that or not, to put that intention out and go, okay, this gong is going to sound amazing. How do I use my skills to bring it out, to accent it, and know when to stop? And I don't have to, my mind doesn't have to track it, because it can't. So I just do it. I get in the space and just be in the moment with it, and just keep on holding that intention. And miracles happen, magic happens, I think, in that space. And sometimes I think the mind just checks out, or it can't. I don't think it can track that level of flow sometimes. Who knows?
Yeah. Wow. Well, I can tell by the way you so eloquently and almost spiritually talk about these instruments and explorations and discoveries that you really, through the wind harp initially, but in the folk harp, you found your heart, you found your passion through this. It's really beautiful to hear you talk about it.
Thank you. I feel blessed to be driven. I ask myself, when you're building harps, it's super labor intensive. I was married to the shop for years. I mean, I was working 7 days a week, always working, and I always wanted to. It was like I was passionate about it, and I looked at that and I said, "Man, are you ever gonna? Where is that? Where is this coming from? This inspiration to continue to build instrument after harp after harp after harp after harp." And it blew my mind. And I think where it was coming from is, and I get the same thing with the gong. I get excited when I start a new gong, because I have this feeling inside. It's like I want to create something that's so magical. When I hear it, it transports me to another space and time. And I've always felt that sound is has such a spiritual quality. It's the harmonic sound is the medium of spiritual transcendence. And so as an instrument builder, I'm always sort of hunting for the lost chord sort of thing. That sound is like, oh, that's it. That's the sound right there. Just don't go away. I just want to listen to that one sound. It can be one chord. Really simple. Simpler the better. But just the harmony that's embedded in there. It's like, oh, that's the one right there. You know what I'm talking about, because you play the violin.
I get it.
You know exactly what I'm talking about, because I mean, here it is. Here's an instrument that's connected to your jaw and your arm. I mean, you're getting it right through your cranium first. I mean, that's the ultimate music therapy, is playing the violin, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, really developmental for me, having started it at age 4. Really. Really, I grew up with that kind of understanding. I will say, the one instrument that brought me a different understanding of that feeling is the gong.
Really?
The gong. And it's such a different approach. And obviously this is so, the violin can be very technical, but luckily I learned to play it more in a meditative, expressive state. But the gong expanded something. There was a vastness that happened with the gong, and very much what you're talking about. So now I approach the violin differently.
Wow.
Than as I do the gong. So yeah, it's really interesting.
Well, I think the gong can teach us how to listen in a different way. It's so, nobody can predict what it's going to do. You don't know what it's going to do, and it's always different. It's always new. It's always an exploration. Maybe
that's it. Maybe certain instruments are kind of predictable, but the gong is not predictable.
It's not.
That's what I like about it. Yeah. You just never know, and you might play it the same way, but it will always respond differently. And as like Mitch Norris says, that the gong is a mirror, for your own energy. That if you don't like what it sounds like, maybe you should adjust your playing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Your energy. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow. Right on.
Well, awesome, Ross. This has really been a pleasure and honestly an inspiration just to hear in your own words and expression how this has all come about for you and really become part of who you are. And these instruments represent that expression. So thank you so much for being open and sharing so much about your path.
You're very welcome. Thanks for checking in.
Yeah. Yeah, you bet.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Sound Heal Podcast, sponsored by the Om Shop and Spa. You can keep up to date with what's coming up next at soundshealstudio.com. Check things out on Facebook at Sounds Heal Studio, and you can listen to all previous podcasts as well as music meditations on the YouTube channel at Sounds Heal Studio. Be well and stay tuned.